Welcome back to the Reef Therapy Podcast, session number 64. Today we're going to start with a little tank-based therapy session. We'll go through some comments that we had on the last podcast episode, and we'll talk about frag swaps. Now that the show season is kind of underway, a lot of smaller frag swaps are happening. Reefapalooza was just recent. Aquashella is coming up, so we've got a lot of those. As you'll notice, it's just Mark and I. Raj is currently enjoying some time in South Africa. I believe he's on a business trip with MRC, but I don't know if you've seen any of these, Mark, but the pictures have started to come in, and I'm very jealous.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't have his phone, I guess. Something happened with his phone. He had to reinstall the apps and all the stuff, so he's finally got communication again. So all the photos of safari and video adventures and things of that will start pouring in. But I think he'll be back next week. So just Mark and I for this session. Mark, how's your week been? And what you drinking tonight?
I'm having a Sweetwater 420, similar to what Raj was drinking last time, although he had some special edition. I still don't know what that was, but since I didn't go on a run and I didn't have beers on my run, I thought I could go a little heavier now and not end up in, drunk ventingville, where I start to, say things I probably regret. Not that that's not really my style. I tend to be a happy drunk, but, so far pretty good week. It's one of those weeks where I had to make all these difficult, decisions with, regards to work and some stuff that we need to figure out with our house. And I was losing a lot of, sleep trying to figure out what to do. And then last Friday, I had finally, we were like, all right, this is what we're going to do. So then you start the weekend all right, there's no more decision making to be had. And then this week, all of my decisions went up in the air again because, there was curveballs. So that was kind of interesting. But
home renovation stuff?
Yeah, other than that. Yeah, there's a couple of work decisions, but then at home, we got we don't have a big yard, but in our not so big yard, I think it's only a quarter of an acre, there's a ton of really old, beautiful trees, but because of those trees, we cannot grow anything. And when we first moved in 13 years ago, the trees were a lot smaller, right? And it all looked okay, but now one tree is starting to blow out a retaining wall that we have, and everything's just kind of going bad. And so then we were like, all right, well, we want to keep trees because I love having a wooded, backyard, but, maybe cut a few out so that there's a little more light coming in. We can grow our shade-tolerant grass a little better, or grow some shade-tolerant plants. But then it's what do you cut down? And then this is more than anybody wants to know, but our favorite trees, or the species of trees that we really love, are in the worst positions, and the trees that are really those can go, crappy ones. I think for anybody living with sweet gums, I don't know if they've got sweet gum trees in St. Louis where they drop those. They're like acorns that are made out of spikes. So if you step on them barefoot, they hurt like hell. So all what you'd call trash trees, I guess, are in the places where it'd be nice to have a mature tree. So that was sort of my wife was like, oh, why are you wanting to cut down our best trees? And I'm like, well, because those are the ones that are shading everything. And anyway, so it was this. And some of these trees are, the guy's like, oh, that's a 70-year-old tree. And you just feel wrong cutting down something that's been alive for 70 years, But
yeah, I feel you on
so,
that.
Yeah, that's sort of the... Yeah.
We have an invasive species of it's called the Bradford pear tree. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I know
so
those. Yeah.
when we first moved into this house, I'm not an arborist by any means. I don't know much about trees, I guess. And we moved into this house, and the first spring we were in it, it's these beautiful white blooms, on the tree, and it lasts for a couple days, maybe, I don't say 5 to 7 days or whatever. You get this beautiful white bloom, and I posted a picture on Facebook, and Facebook went nuts. They're like, oh, I hope you enjoy that sperm-smelling tree, because apparently that's...
That's where my brain went, because we had one on our driveway and the smell was awful.
So there's that, and then also, you get all the people that are like, the state of Missouri will actually replace that with a a native tree for no charge if you take that down. And I'm like, well, this thing is huge. I mean, it must be, and they grow fast, so it must be 10, 15 years old or something like that. But I swear this happened just randomly. Was pulling into my driveway one day, just barely missed it. But it was a beautiful day, light breeze, 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we heard the loudest pop, and half the tree came down in our driveway on a
That's what
on
they're
a
known
calm
for
day.
doing.
This thing has been through almost tornado, like sustained winds, 60, 70, 80 mile per hour winds. We get some pretty crazy severe storms through here. But no, 5 to 10 miles per hour, just like cracked in half. So we have half a tree in our front yard.
Right now?
Well, I'm just surprised it hasn't gone over, because now it's not aerodynamic at all. It's just like a wall on one side of branches. But yeah, we need to, take that thing down.
We had one of those next to our driveway when we bought this house, and it was beautiful. But in our old neighborhood, I had seen so many of those Bradford pears crack and then just come down. And it's right next to the driveway where the cars are. And I was like, that thing's got to go. So we replaced it. But there's still so many in the neighborhood. And again, talking about, not to bring up running, but when they bloom and you're running, you're doing like a 3 to 5 mile run, and all you smell is like that sperm smell. You're just like, it's like sort of like bleach, right? Like kind of chlorine. Like, oh, dude, it's so brutal.
Yeah.
Not a fan of those guys.
Yeah, we're hoping to get that maybe taken down here this summer. I just want a tree in my front yard, and this thing is so big and it's nice, and I don't know what my front yard would look like without a tree. And then you got to grind the stump out and all that kind of stuff. So, not looking forward to that. How's your tanks? Anything going on new there?
Yeah, actually, this would be a good time to bring up somebody's question. I saw a comment about how I'm managing calc and pH.
Got it here. Mitchell says, can Mark go into more detail and talk about what equipment he is using to monitor and maintain pH while dosing calc?
Yeah, so, and I know Neptune will tell you not to do this, but I have both of my reef tanks on the same Neptune system. I don't do any special coding like what Chris Meckley had, I think, suggested about having your dosage be somewhat managed by your pH level, which you can do with an Apex, because, right, if you have a Apex dose pump and you have an Apex, pH probe, or you have any pH probe plugged into an Apex. I don't do it that way, but I got lucky with my first experiment of the small tank where I managed to dial in my overnight calc dosing so that my nighttime pH is more closely matched to my daytime pH, and sort of, created that stability. And then I got all excited, and, I saw that my corals were doing great, and I haven't really been thinking about alk, and so I finally felt comfortable trying it with the big tank. I'm struggling with that one because of a couple of factors. One, choosing a different dosing pump than what I use in the basement, and Chris Meckley will tell you, like, don't use a calc stirrer, just use a big vat. And he kept telling me, like, a calc stirrer won't work. But I've seen so many people, including Jake, his studio's full of calc stirrers. So I was like, I'm just going to go with a calc stirrer because it's just easier for me to do that than have a giant vat, you know. And sure enough, I can't get the pH dialed in with that. And I don't know if it's the calc stirrer. I need to test the pH in the calc stirrer solution to see if it's dropping from 12 down to whatever, and seeing if it's like losing its potency. Or the Versa pump is different than my other dosing pump, which is a Kumura, because a Kumura is like, okay, you want to dose this much during this window of time, but it doesn't dose continuously. It was like every few minutes it just hammers a big dose in, right? So it gives you that nice big spike. And the Versa, I know you can do this with the Versa, but it's a lot more complicated. But right now it's just continuously dosing. So if you split up, let's say 10 liters over 10 hours, it's a tiny little drop going every, second. Whereas I really wanted to do like a big squirt and then, like a lot of calc, not a lot, but like a decent amount, and then just hang out for a bit and then do it again maybe 10 minutes later, much like my Kimura. And you can do in the Versa, like, you can add as many windows, like time intervals, and then say during for 1 hour dose this much, and then maybe wait an hour, and then for 1 hour, or I guess you could do it by 5 minute intervals, but that'd be such a pain in the ass to set up in the Versa. So I got to figure something out. Maybe somebody who knows the Versa better than me can comment if there's an easier way. Maybe I'm totally dumb and I'm missing a way to do this easily, but I don't want continuous dosing, right? I'd rather it deliver like 100 mLs and then hang out for a little bit and then do it like drop by drop. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm struggling is, maybe I throw a big vat in the basement and just ditch the Kalkster and then keep the Versa as is, or maybe I just need to tune the Versa to get where I need to be. I mean, this is all like 24 hours ago. This entered my brain, so I don't really have a clear thought about it yet, but that's what I'm doing, and as long as I'm slowly ramping up the amount I'm dosing, and just keeping an eye on my pH. So I don't really have anything coded like if pH greater than turn off the dosing pump or anything. I don't do anything crazy like that. Gotcha. So, but yeah, I mean, do you do calc dosing?
I started last year. I'm doing it the entirely wrong way in my top off. When I get these new tanks in here, I'm gonna set up everything correctly and not do it like that. But I'm not bad. I'm like 8.3 to 8.1.
That's good.
So that it'll usually drop to that 8.1 overnight. But yeah, it's calc is tried and true, and yeah, it's probably hard on my auto top off pumps and all of that stuff right now. But like I said, I've actually got a 4-bank of Versa pumps I have not used yet. I'm ready for whatever this next big tank is going to be, and I'm just like holding out all of this equipment that I've kind of acquired over time here, and I want to put it on that tank, some Ecotech lights and Versa pumps and all that kind of stuff. So but yeah, I think that calc is one of those things that it's so simple, and I feel like that's why so many people enjoy it so much. But it has been outshined, I feel like, for many years by the 2-part stuff, and choose your poison, I guess. But the calc is going to be a lot cheaper, especially if you got a big tank. I mean, that's the way to go, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I have a calcium reactor sitting on a shelf I don't use. I really enjoyed going the 2-part, and yeah, it was slightly more expensive than running my calcium reactor. But that also depended on which 2-part you use, because some are really concentrated, whereas others are, weaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I just ended up going with a more concentrated brand. And I just kind of build it into my hobby. Like, all right, once a month on Amazon, order 2 gallons of, some 2-part solution. But it was just interesting that the pH thing, I was like, I'm not worried about pH. My corals are growing great. I had low pH when I ran a calcium reactor for the last 20 years. And then, Meckley got into my head. And then it was like, because I remember the days where we were dosing stuff in the 90s, and it was all about calcium. And it wasn't until I set up a calcium reactor and then you start to read about how to dial in a calcium reactor. And it's like, okay, well, you want your effluent to hit, a certain pH, and then you want to start testing your alkalinity, right? Because it's really an alkalinity reactor. And then everybody, like, just the thing was alkalinity, but alkalinity is just a measurement of your water's ability to buffer against like acids and stuff, right? Am I getting that right? Or it's I don't know, but I mean, it's not really a direct measurement of carbonates per se, because it's all different types of bicarbonates, carbonates, whatever. So it's just interesting. It's like, well, wait, what if we think about stabilizing pH? But this big tank is pissing me off because I've got a CO2 monitor. I mean, I've been down the rabbit hole now, and I've got the CO2 in my house is fine. It did spike sometimes, but right now, like this time of year, like the CO2 is like 400 to 600 parts per million. So I don't necessarily think it's making a huge impact on the
Yeah.
tank. But I mean, this basement tank's dialed into like 8.3 just with calc, and it's next to a gas furnace, right? Like that's producing all kinds of carbon monoxide and stuff. Um, and then, this tank upstairs that's like in a sunroom, like with lots of airflow, is like it got this depressed pH. And I don't know. I don't know what the story is. I've got the probe calibrated.
Do you have a
So,
walkout
I don't know,
basement?
I'll
Is that
figure it out.
door that's behind you lead to the outside?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a side entry basement, which those are cool because your backyard, well, depending on how your outside is, but it's nice because the deck is level with the backyard. It's only a few
Gotcha.
steps down. Um, the downside of a side entry basement is all the windows are just on one side and there's no other windows anywhere else. So, the way the basement was finished by the previous homeowners, it's like I'm sitting next to the door.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got this
But,
kind of lookout, I think they call it a lookout basement. So you can see out into the backyard from these windows. Our last house had a walkout
nice.
basement, and that was really nice. You could just open the doors down there and all the windows. And I don't know. There's I don't have a CO2 monitor down here, so I'd be interested to see what that is. Although I'm not growing anything super crazy or have any huge tanks down here, so but that may all come in time to monitor all that. But
yeah, I was just curious, because not just from a tank pH perspective, but just also I'd replaced all the windows and I wanted to see if that changed the household CO2 and all that. And I mean, just for my own health. And it's interesting, this room where I sit in, I put it in here once. And when I'm working from home and I'm just here by myself in this one little room, there must not be a lot of airflow here because the CO2 just skyrockets. And of course, in my brain, I'm always tired near the end of the day. And I think it's just because it's a work day and you get tired near the end of the day. But my brain's like, it's the CO2, like it's my brain is needing oxygen or something. But yeah. But yeah, no, it's I mean, there's nothing fancy. Like if you step outside this door, you're staring at my neighbor's driveway. So it's nothing too exciting. I can't just like on a nice spring day, I don't like open the door and like, I'm working from home and taking calls because then my neighbor's just like staring at me like, hey. So,
yeah. So I guess to hope that answers your question, Mitchell. I have, as far as like what I've been doing down here is just kind of the waiting game right now. Like I said in the last podcast, I just have a lot of corals that I don't really want to be growing that are growing. Lots of Kenya tree, like we talked about last time. I've got this Galaxia that is amazingly happy, and just I've never seen so many sweepers on a coral in my life. And they always, you always talk about your local fish store or whoever that's selling you the Galaxia will be like, oh, put it on an island by itself or put that away from everything else because those sweepers are long. And I never really noticed it before, but this one is like claiming its territory. And right now it's probably got, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 sweepers out. It's just like, it looks like it's on, it's being electrocuted or something. But yeah, I'm just kind of waiting because I have all this coral that's overgrown, but then I've also got a lot of pieces that I really want to keep and put into a new tank and a new system and let them thrive there. So I'm just kind of waiting.
Are you allowed to talk about your future tank, or are you trying to keep that under wraps for future Reef Builder content?
We kind of touched on it last time. So Ultim Nature Systems is a sponsor of Reef Builders, and they do a lot of freshwater stuff. They do have some all-in-one tanks, which is one that I will be getting. It'll be smaller. I want to say the tank is your favorite size, Mark, 13 gallons, I think, or 14 gallons.
Oh, jeez.
But I want to do a very natural reef in there, something that's, macro / leather / Gorgonians, that kind of thing, white light. It's on a natural wood grain stand. So I think that's really aesthetically, I think that's going to be the right play for that tank. And then later this year, hopefully getting that bigger tank. And I don't have full details on that, but I'm excited to get like a chunky something to put some frags in and some coral in, and I've got a bunch of I've got a couple toads that are pretty beefy right now, but and hearing you and Jake talk about these nice luscious leather corals that we all love so much, they ruin the flow. They get in the way. They take up a lot of room. But yeah, so we'll see what makes the cut for the next tank. But
I had to get rid of. I had one that was as big as a 5-gallon bucket, and it shaded everybody and everything for a good third of my 6-foot tank, and it was such a showpiece. I mean, it was everybody's favorite coral. Even when I posted pictures online, that was like the most talked about coral in the picture. But I was like, it's got to go because it's, it would be a cool specimen or species tank. Like Jake did these where he just had like a single elegance coral in a cube tank. That would have been cool. But so I took it to my local fish store, and one of the guys that works there, he was helping maintain a large system that. The problem with large tanks is you put the size frags are today, like you put frags in like a 300-gallon tank, they just disappear. So this guy was looking for some large corals and graciously took it. So, and no regrets on that. I do still have a Japanese green polyp leather. I don't know if it's from Japan, but that's what every online Japanese seller says it is.
Yeah.
Deep water, yeah. Yeah, that's that's a whole other story. I don't understand the naming of, but it's a cool coral, and it's it's starting to finally grow, and I kind of wonder if there was some chemical warfare going on with that big leather, because once I removed him, my other leathers that were just sort of doing their thing but not really growing suddenly started to grow, and it wasn't because they were getting more light, because they were on the opposite side of the tank. So it was kind of interesting to see them suddenly start taking off.
I feel like most leathers are pretty shallow. Am I wrong on that? Like most leather corals found in the ocean are fairly shallow. So I remember posting, or someone posted something about a deep water Japanese coral. And someone was like, it's not from Japan and it's not found in deep water.
I know Lobophytum, finger devil's hand leathers. When I was in Mozambique, we were doing these 150-foot dives, which is really funny because I was not deep water certified, and I'm not nitrox certified, but the crew I was with were like, you're fine. Like you're like, Mark, you can dive with nitrox, right? I was like, sure. And then, it was like, I was used to cattle boat diving, like these big boats where they flip a ladder down in the back and you climb in, and like, all of a sudden you think you're like a Navy SEAL, like you're in a dinghy going out of the ocean and you're flipping backwards and all that. But anyway, we were down, I don't know, I can't do it. Maybe it was 120 feet it was 40 meters. What is that? I think that's about 120 feet. And there were these lobophytums that were as big as, my driveway. I mean, they were insane. Just huge. Just like a carpet. You realize it's like, oh, that's one leather coral. Just one big ass leather coral. So I do think they go deep, but to your point, if you watch any people like documenting stuff from Indonesia and all that stuff, or even like they'll be in a mangrove area and you'll see like leather corals growing off the mangrove roots. Yeah. And then Jake did that great video in the Solomon Islands, and he was like, I think he was like in snorkel depth, and there were leather
Yeah,
corals
maybe 10,
everywhere.
20
So
feet or something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's one of my favorite videos of his. I'll go
I
back and
know.
watch that regularly. He's got, I think there was a couple of videos in that series, but that's one of my favorites. It just, not only does it put you in the ocean seeing, corals in their natural habitat, but it also puts you on that kind of like it's like an
Yeah.
off the grid trip, where I'm
Yeah.
all I'm gonna do is snorkel and scuba dive, and I'm gonna lay in a hammock and eat the rest of the time and drink beer. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That kind of throws those vibes to me.
Yeah, he told me a lot of stories about that trip, and they just. I don't think he brought a sleeping bag, and he was using like leaves or something as a blanket, palm leaves, or maybe he was using them as a mattress in like a hut. I don't know, but I remember hearing like he was talking about it. I was just like,
Yeah.
yes, like that's my, because I love backpacking and all that, and that was what was great about Mozambique is it was camping and scuba diving. I mean, it was like literally you slept in a tent in a nature preserve where there were like elephants and monkeys and all this
Yeah.
crazy stuff, and then you hopped in the back of a pickup truck like an old Toyota. You just held on for dear life, and they just went over these sand dunes to the ocean, and then you went scuba diving and saw corals and emperor angelfish, and then you go back and have a braai, which is like a barbecue, and you go back and sleep in your tent. I'm like, I was in heaven, right? It was like you just melded like two things I love to do into one thing. So when he told me that Solomon trip, I was like, man, that's heaven. I'd love to do that. I don't need a fancy
Yeah.
hotel.
You need to
Yeah.
get Raj
So
to start a Reef Builders trip, and we need to do that like once a year. If you want to come, it's X amount of dollars, and we'll camp on the beach and do that whole thing. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I don't know if my wife would like that, but
yeah, it's the getting, like limited corporate job PTO, and it's like, well, half of it I'm gonna go with a bunch of my hobbyist friends, and I'm gonna, it's like, it's like, well, what about family vacation and Christmas? And you're like, oh,
yeah.
that's always tricky.
We've been putting together a trip for next week. So I'm headed to Orlando on Friday of next week. I guess when this comes out, it will be in 2 days. And then from there, shooting at Top Shelf Aquatics. We're going to do a bunch of video stuff
nice.
there with the guys. And then from there, I'm going to be utilizing a Frag container and going through TSA with frags, which I've never done before, and I'm a little nervous about. But I know it's been done. It can be done. It's totally okay. And making a video about that, and then going to the Reef Builder studio for, I think I'll actually be in Golden maybe a total of maybe 15 to 20 hours. And I'll be doing some stuff with Steve at ICP Analysis, and then some stuff at the studio too. So hopefully this will give people a good glimpse of, what the studio looks like right now in its current state. And I know that there's a hefty amount of coral vendors that will be providing a lot of coral to go back into the studio. So while some of it went out, we're going to bring a whole lot back in. So very excited about all that, and some videos coming out. So it's going to be a crazy trip.
That'd
I'm
be
like,
cool.
are you sure you want to rely on airlines for this tight turn trip? I got to work on Monday. I got to be back on the radio Monday morning. So we'll see if that all works out. But if you're in the Orlando area or in Denver, hit me up for sure. That is going to be crazy. Are your kids into reefing at all, Mark? How old are they, by the way?
Not. So I got an 8-year-old son and is he 8? Yeah, I should know this. He's 8. He's turning, where is he? No, he's turning 8 next month. I'm really bad with numbers. And then my daughter's turning 13 this year in August, so she's 12. They know enough about it, but they're not, super passionate about it or anything like that. But they, they can identify crap like at the store, like, oh, look, there's that firefish, Dad, and all that. But have you ever taken them anywhere where they can snorkel?
No, we have not done that yet, but I have a feeling that may turn the tide a little bit.
I think that helped with my kids. We did Hawaii last year and the year prior, just the whole COVID lockdown, when things started to open up again, I'm like, we're going big, right? We're not just gonna go down to Florida like we always do, which for us in Georgia is, just a drive. I was like, I want to go somewhere where there's coral reefs, and I mean, I wanted to go further, but with all the COVID stuff, it was like, all right, well, because there were still lockdowns happening and weird stuff. So I was like, well, it's the United States, right? Like, I don't have to. It's just like going to Colorado if you go to Hawaii. So, but anyway, they loved the snorkeling. And then I think it was just something about, you've got a yellow tang in your reef tank swimming around, and it's just this thing they take for granted because it's always been there. I mean, I've had a reef tank since before they were born. So it's just this thing, swimming around in the living room. Well, not in the living, you know what I mean, in your house. But then all of a sudden seeing all that stuff in a natural environment, and, you're putting on the gear and you're going against the waves, and all of a sudden you see this whole underwater world. It just, it was interesting. Like, that something went off in their head. Like, wow, like, this is really crazy. And then they'd be like, Dad, because they could identify everything. Okay, that's a coal tang, that's a yellow tang. But then I'm just having a good old time, like, looking at for like the itsy bitsy critters. Like, I always love looking for like little invertebrates and stuff. And then it's like, but I couldn't really get into my own world because every time I was like, Dad, what's this fish? And it would be something that they'd never seen before, and they couldn't identify it. So then for them, it was like, oh, okay, bring the encyclopedia dad over to figure out what this thing is. And I don't know, I think that helped. And it also made them appreciate those fish that are swimming around in their house. Like, oh, okay, that yellow tang's from Hawaii. And so anyway, it might be fun to take them somewhere like that one day. And it's something they can do. Like, scuba diving is a different story, right? You got to be like a certain age and all that, but snorkeling they can do pretty young. But yeah, I was just curious if you had done that before with them.
We've not been to the beach yet. We've been to Disney World once, and that seems to be the go-to spot whenever my wife wants to go somewhere. It's usually going to be Disney related or theme park related, but I really want to get them to a beach for sure. I want to get to a beach for sure. I haven't been diving in a long time, and it's been so long that I probably need to do some refresher stuff. If
same here.
Reef Stock Australia happens for me, which it sounds like it might, I mean, I have to.
Oh, yeah.
I have to go, somewhere and just do a dive if time allows, or a couple dives. And I want to be totally refreshed for that. So we've got a couple diving outfits here in the St. Louis area that can do some refreshers. I don't know if we've got any quarries. I actually got certified in a quarry in the Chicagoland area, and it's just like bluegill and bass staring at you because everybody feeds them when you go down there. So
I did mine in Colorado, and all I could see was crawfish.
Oh, yeah.
Everywhere. But I remember, at least in Colorado, there were decent flights down to Mexico and Cozumel, and wasn't too bad, even though it was landlocked. We have the luxury now, Atlanta, like, there's usually, you can find some good deals to the Caribbean and stuff from our airport, but I really want to go to the Pacific more. Hawaii is really diverse for fish, not so diverse for corals. But it was for young kids, and during COVID and all the question marks around that, it was just an easy choice. But now that hopefully COVID is in the rearview mirror, and the kids are getting older, I'm like, all right, like Bali, who's in? Everybody want to go to Bali?
Gosh, that would be awesome.
Somewhere out there would be cool. But
yeah, that would be awesome. We got a couple comments on the last podcast I wanted to address. Reef Girl says, Mark was wondering how to describe the motivations between plant people, gardeners, and bonsai. After my second significant tank crash and recovery, I finally realized what was driving my passion for the hobby. It's nurturing. I realized I'm a nurturer, and I'm thinking that probably the core of passions that are similar to hobbyists that we try to pursue. She said, I really enjoy listening to you guys. Keep it coming. I guess that makes sense, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah. Because, I mean, I think that's the best joy you get is when your corals are just growing and thriving. Like, that's the best satisfaction, right? And I could see that, you know, plant people, bonsai, which is, I guess, a plant too, but slightly different, you know. You're still applying your care and nurture to something and, you know, watching it thrive. And you know, there's purpose in it, right? So, and if you have a purpose, you feel joy, right? So, it's a good point. I mean, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun learning about plants, and I think it's because I don't know anything about it. Like, I'm the idiot that's like on the Facebook groups going like, why does my plant look like this? And they're like, you idiot, you know, you're overwatering it, or that particular plant likes better drainage. You should move it to somewhere with better drainage. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know. Sorry. You know, like, but I'm learning. It's like, oh, this is fun. Not that I know everything about reef keeping, but it's sort of fun to dive into something that's similar in nature, but, you know, where you are nurturing for something, and it does require some passion about biology and chemistry and all that, but yet I don't know all these things. Like, I don't know what all the plants are, and it's kind of fun. So hopefully I don't go into like planted aquariums and tear down my reef tank. You know, I really love those fish that Jake had. He had these freshwater ultims that were just, man, and they're hard to get. Like, they're very seasonal and stuff. So. And there was by the way, I mean, I don't know if you probably didn't save this comment, but somebody mentioned I should listen to a podcast, and it's I forget the gentleman's name. I think it's Jeff Sensky, or and he was interviewing Heiko Blair
about where the cardinal tetra actually, or how it was actually discovered.
Yeah, because we were talking about Axelrod being a shady character, and I just want to say I did listen to that podcast, and man, it was good. And they went into, because I did not know that he was the guy that also discovered the Altum angelfish, which is my, you know, holy grail freshwater fish, and it was just good storytelling, and made me want to go set up a freshwater tank. Yeah. So thanks for that recommendation.
That was Reef Girl. Let's see here. Troy H says, I love where the series is going. The chemistry between you three is spot on. It is obviously the energy that is brought to every episode now. Keep up the excellent work. Amir, who is actually a reefer here in St. Louis, said, great show hosted by some of the best. Much appreciated, guys. I paid him to say that. Blue Reef says, Jake is right. A simple sump Jake is right. A simple sump, the better you are. What a waste of money. People spending $250 to $600 for a sump. Spend it on rare fish or a favorite coral. Yes, Mark, DIY sump, and socks are a waste. Why I like Mark and Jake, common sense. So, kudos to you.
Yeah, Raj. No, I'm just kidding. I agree, man. I don't know. Raj and I will disagree on that. Raj has a company that makes amazing sumps that are very high quality. And I was thinking about his comment about Paletta and where he's coming from. And he's not here to, you know, tell me I'm wrong, so I should bring it up now. But he's also coming from a different point of view, right? Like, he deals with large public aquariums. And I think in those type of situations, like, for instance, I don't care about detritus. I think the stuff you see in your sump is ugly, but I think it's probably mostly inert. I've never really had issues as my detritus built up in my sump with it. I mean, I've got piles of it, you know, and I do siphon it out every once in a while when I go for a spring cleaning, but I don't run mechanical filtration because of that. But my biggest tank is a 6x2 tank with a 4-foot sump. If I want to pull out all the built-up detritus, I just have to get the Python gravel vac out, hook it up to my sink, have a cup of coffee, listen to a podcast, and it takes me a few hours, and I've got spick and span clean tank again. That's not so easy to do on a 200,000 gallon reef aquarium at the Georgia Aquarium, right? So I can understand that if you're coming at it from a commercial or public aquarium perspective, you sort of want to nip that in the bud and say, okay, like let's have mechanical filtration so that it, we can sort of shore that up in one settling tank or whatever and remove it versus having all this crap build up, because a spring cleaning on a huge tank is a whole different ball game. So I get where he's coming from, where if you're building a life support system that everyone's going to walk to and see, it's a different purpose. So you're going to go at it from a different approach than me with my au naturel tank, where just I let, I grow some algae. Like, you can't build you could, but like a refugium for a 200,000 gallon tank, what would that even look like? Than had a really good point about that too, about large tanks, about he was talking about, like, oh, you just, when you have algae, you just stock up on some herbivores, order some snails, order some tangs. And he was talking about his 500 plus gallon tanks. He's like, you can't put enough herbivores in a tank that size to like knock down the algae because the system is just too big. And he's like, it's sort of like the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, if you go in for like a spring cleaning or whatever and you start to clean it, by the time you get to the other side of the tank, this side's already gone. Like, this side needs work again, And so I think when you go into larger systems, it makes sense that maybe your filtration is going to be a little more complex, because you can kind of reset a tank that's 180 gallons pretty easy. Big water change, siphon out all the ugly crap, and then you're trucking again. So I get where he's coming from, but yeah, I mean, the systems that Jake kept and that I guess I have experience with. I mean, my biggest tanks was 225. There's just no need for filter socks and all that crazy stuff. I just think it's just work. Plus, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a tree hugger, but I don't like all the waste, Like a lot of the mechanical filtration is made out of plastic. You can only use it so many times before you got to buy a new one, a new filter sock. I don't know. I think all you need is really the most important thing is maybe a way to flow water through some chemical filtration. So, if you want to run carbon passively without a media reactor, you can sort of design your sump to do that for you passively. And then skimmers work best if they have constant water level. So just have a compartment, have a divider so that the water level stays consistent in your sump, and that's all you need. Or if you're like me, you like to grow algae, you kind of want to, you don't want that plugging up your skimmer and all that. So you want to keep that separate.
Love to see, because I think Mr. Saltwater Tank uses MRC gear on a lot of his client stuff. I'd love to see it a year after or 2 years after, because we always see it when it's being installed. But what is it? Yeah,
before the filter feeder, fan worms and all the crap
exactly.
sponges.
What does it look like a year later or 2 years later? Because that stuff's all going to grow in there regardless.
Well, and the other, not to beat a dead horse, but with public aquariums, water clarity is way more important too, right? Because you're looking through a much larger volume of water, so I can see that polishing the water makes more sense than my
going
size
through
tank,
ozone and all that stuff. And I remember touring the St. Louis Aquarium and all the protocols you have to follow if there's a leak, ozone leak or something like that. And it's crazy the amount of ozone that they're working with as opposed to what we might use in the hobby. It's pretty insane. So, but yeah, the difference in sizes definitely makes a big difference in that. Last week we talked about how my club had our biannual frag swap. And it went well. It was great. I feel like numbers at frag swaps have definitely declined, and I'm not sure if that's. I'm sure there's a number of factors that go into that. One of them for us, and it's always been a problem, and I don't know if this is a problem for you guys, but marketing. There were so many different people that came up to me that they were like, "I just found out about this yesterday." Like, marketing for frag swaps is not awesome right now. I don't know that it ever really has been. We're approaching summer, and not a lot of people have extra change for corals at this point. Inflation is a real thing, and everything costs more. And when your grocery bill is going up $150 every month or whatever, because everything's more expensive, it's hard to justify going to a frag swap and just aimlessly buying coral. But I wanted to know, before we get into the $100 coral challenge, when you do go into a frag swap or when you do go to a show, what's your approach? How are you going in? Are you going in with something in mind? Are you going in with a budget? Like, I can't go over $200-$300. What is it for you?
I tend to be, if I'm going to go there, I tend to be a little more flexible about my budget. Just because it's usually, not something you do all the time, right? So if I'm going to an aquarium show and I went there and there's all these vendors, then I know that there's a higher likelihood that I will see some cool stuff that I may not see at my local fish store. So I tend to be a little more flexible about my budget in those cases. But I think I can do that because I don't buy a lot of coral. So if I have an aquarium budget, which I sort of do, it sort of just builds up because I'm not really every weekend at the local fish store, kind of thing. I used to when I was, younger. It's just I don't have the time, and two, I don't have the space in my tank anymore. I go in and I'm more looking for something that I haven't seen before, but I don't. The problem is a lot of the stuff that I think is cool is probably stuff everyone else thinks is cool and has like a $2,000 price tag, and I just can't justify that. So it's more looking at stuff that I think has a reasonable price tag that I think is interesting. And a lot of times it's probably something nobody else thinks is interesting because I'm more interested in a coral species or genus that you don't see in the trade very often versus like the battle bot mushroom, which I just totally made up. If somebody should totally come up with a battle
Mark gets
bot
10%
mushroom
of every sale.
Yeah, if you use the name. No. So yeah, I look for just the weird stuff, and there's usually you find something unique, right? Where like each coral vendor got something random in their shipment.
Yep.
They're like, oh, I don't know what that is, but let's take it. So, I watched your video and I actually liked the corals you chose. I was like, all right, because you could easily have copped out with that budget and just
bought one torch.
That or just bought like, okay, I got some Xenia. I got this, just the stuff that nobody wants. But I think you did it in a way where you actually brought home some really unique and interesting corals, like branching well, I'll let you talk about it. I don't want to, but I like the branching. I have a pink branching Cyphastria, and I was having a debate with somebody if the green with pink polyp branching Cyphastria is the same thing but just different lighting, or if there is more GFP in that one or what, because mine is just pink on pink, and I really want the green on pink. So I saw that you scored that, and I was a little jealous. I was like, oh, wow.
How does it grow for you? I mean, I don't. Maybe it's it'll obviously vary from tank to tank, but how does that grow for you?
Mine had interesting, you could call it branching when it was in its early days, but then if you look at it now, it sort of continues to grow in on itself. So it looks like a softball that has lots of holes in it, if that makes sense. So from afar, it doesn't look like a branching coral, but then you look more closely. The problem with mine is it's sort of similar to what happens to bird's nest, at least for me with bird's nest, is I can't get a lot of flow in there anymore. So internally, things have died off, and there's like sponges and stuff growing inside of it, but you could barely tell. You have to really look at it because all the branches sort of overlap each other into a ball. It's a super cool coral, and it's pretty hardy. It's not one of those that takes a dump on you if you get your alk on, one weekend, you have your alk drop or something like it. It's pretty
Where do you
bomb-proof.
have it in the tank?
I keep mine pretty low just because it's gotten, mine's it's bigger than a softball now, so there's not many places I can put it, so I keep it pretty low.
Yeah, that was a cool coral. The guy had a couple different frags of it in his tank, and one was 25 and one was 30. And I just figured, $5 difference, get the bigger one. And I say bigger, and it's still not the size of the frag plug. So,
Yeah.
but there are many different color variations of Cyphastria, the encrusting type that will just take the shape of whatever rock it's on, or you've seen. I think Jake did he have a Triceratops head in one of his coral flats that he was growing Cyphastria on? But yeah, I think going into this video, it was very much. I know that I can get a decent amount of coral just because it is a local frag swap. With $100, but I also wanted to illustrate, I think, because we do hear that this hobby is so expensive all the time, and it's just like you get beat over the head with that all the time, and really it's manageable, I think. And even at a frag swap, you'll see the $2,000 corals. They're totally there.
Yeah.
But you don't have to buy those, and you can still get some pretty respectable corals like the branching Cyphastria. We had a great debate on what this green shaggy SPS was. I asked many people, and it's so interesting because we talked about taxonomy last time and how it changes so much, and these taxonomists are just like reclassifying things all the time. And I saw this frag, and to me, I was like, oh, sweet, this is like a branching Hydnophora, and then you don't really see that too often at frag swaps, so I'll pick that up. And had a bunch of guys come over, and the vendor was very much like, I don't know what it is, but it's not a Hydnophora. It's not a Hydnophora. And come to find out, it's actually just a Passilopora, what's the Damicornis? Yeah, but it's super shaggy and super green. Like the body is also kind of a lime green too, the skeleton or the skin that hugs the skeleton there. It's really, really cool. And it's been out since I got it and since I put it in the tank. So all the polyps are waving in the flow, which is pretty cool. So from my challenge, I got 7 corals total. And one of those was a freebie. One of those was a freebie at the door. And I don't know that all frag swaps do that, but I mean, it's about $17 per frag. I'm not buying Xenia. I'm not buying GSP. I'm not buying, one polyp of Gobstopper zoanthid, So like you said, I think I got some pretty decent stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there was more of that variety online at that price. I mean, there's live sales and all of that. I just can't keep up with all the, okay, live sale at 10 a.m. on Saturday, blah, blah, blah. Follow this thread. I'm like, dude, I want to buy coral on a Tuesday, when my wife's watching some TV show I don't like, and I just want to open my laptop and be like, oh, that's a cool coral. I don't want to have to log in at 10 a.m. during my kid's soccer game because that's when the live sale's happening, and
I've totally done that. It's so bad.
I've done it a couple of times. I felt bad because I'd ordered some corals from Unique Corals, and then I think they gave me a credit because one of the corals, I don't remember, but then they suddenly had a live sale, and I think I was just having like a boring day, and I was just like, all right, and then I bought a bunch of corals, and then I was like, wait, where am I going to put all these corals? And then it was like, I actually messaged him. I was like, hey, I just ordered all this crap like 30 minutes ago. Can I cancel my order? Because I think the fever of just like, oh, that's a good deal got to me. And they were like, well, we can give you a store credit. And I was like, no, in that case, just send me the corals, Like, if the money's been spent, that's what I would have spent it on. But yeah, I don't know. I just... you've got sometimes a coral vendor and they'll have like their 20 and under page and it'll just be like the crap they're trying to get rid of. But I don't know. I'd love to see, especially when you're throwing in like 30, like shipping is expensive for them and for us, right? So I get it. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of corals that are really cool and interesting that don't have to be so expensive, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Pavona cactus. I think you got one of those too, right?
The other, that's not like the cactus version, the potato chip version. I'm not sure what the species name is on that.
Isn't that the cactus?
I
Pavona
think the
cactus?
cactus is the larger
Maybe
one,
I'm
but
getting that one.
I'll look real quick.
Oh, you're talking about the smaller growth
Yeah,
form. That's yeah. I know what you're talking about. I have Pavona cactus, and it's I don't know the size of a. I don't know. It's about 10 inches, and I mean I've had that coral since the dawn of time, and I've hacked it back. I love that coral. It's like it looks so different than everything else in the tank, right? Just the way it grows.
that's
Um,
frondifera is the potato chip, and
Frondifera.
from the Reef Builders
Yeah.
article in 2012, it's still Pavona cactus, but I just saw Dekusada, but I could be totally wrong on that. It's funny because in trying to identify that Bacillopora, talked to an actual student of taxonomy, and he said that whatever if what you're calling things are from before 2020, most of it is probably wrong.
Yeah.
So anything that we know is maybe wrong. But yeah, the Pavona stuff is. I've always wanted one. I prefer the smooth one as opposed to the. Is yours? Does it have the hairiness to it?
No, it's
Yeah.
pretty smooth. Um, yeah, it's like I mean it's definitely potato chip forming, but just much
Gotcha.
larger, and then it always has like a white growth edge. And I break it all the time with my algae magnet, and then it just starts growing on my substrate, and then so I just have like a ton of it growing around. But I love that coral. It doesn't grow too fast. Everybody wants fast growing corals, but once they get bigger, you don't want them to grow
True.
too
Yeah.
fast, right? And it's a showpiece. It's beautiful. It's a nice color. Yeah, I don't know. That was another good pickup. So you could have that coral for like the rest of your life. It just they're so hardy. There's that's another bomb proof where you got your canary in the coal mine corals that'll let you know you're messing up. Like hey man, you need to fill your two part or but like the cactus, just as I call it, it just grows and just doesn't care that you haven't done a water change in
Yeah.
a year. And
You
know
did.
that
You made a good point about these corals that I picked up for, I don't know, fairly cheap, and just having to buy them online. That is one place I think where online really suffers. Is I just searched branching Cyphastria frag. I'm not gonna say where this is, but it's $79, and plus you got to pay another 30
yeah.
for shipping. So you're not just gonna get that coral. You're looking at probably, I don't know, $200 to $300 later to justify that.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? Is to make up for the shipping costs or to get into the free shipping, which is usually like at 250, 300. It's just it's I'm not blaming the vendors, but it's just beyond the local fish store. It's still hard to get when you just one coral,
Yeah.
right? Like if you want a branching Cyphastria, you're like, that's just all I need. I got everything else I need. I really want a branching Cyphastria. If your local fish store doesn't have it, you're just gonna end up spending like 70 plus 30 for shipping. I mean, it's a bit
Yeah.
crazy still. If it was $15, you'd be like, all right, plus 30 shipping. Okay, $45. Okay, I can do that for a single coral, but I don't know. I'm not. Yeah, it sounds like I'm complaining, and maybe I am.
Well,
But
everybody's situation is different, and I think that's something that we'll get comments on as well. I don't live next to a place or I don't live in a city with frag swaps, or
right,
I have to drive 2 hours to get to my local fish store, and I totally understand that, and I get it. But it's just how this whole thing goes. I guess if you're away from the resource, you're gonna have to pay a premium for it, and that's just.
well, and there's like the thrill of the hunt too, right? Like, so you don't get your instant gratification, but when you finally do go to a show and that coral you've been wanting is there,
Yeah.
you're like, yes, finally, right? So there's that. My frustration, which nobody can fix for me, is I'll want 3 corals, but not a single coral vendor has all 3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on, man. Like, I'm not going to pay double shipping from 2 different
Yeah.
vendors,
Yeah, I will say
So-
torches have come down. Most of the Indo stuff has come down in price significantly. Man, I remember seeing green torches at frag swaps during and just after the Indo ban. I mean, regular green torch is going for $250, and now I think most of the common torches are down to, that $50 to $90 range, which is kind of nice to see. And the vendors had tons of torches. There was so many torches. Obviously, Euphilia is very popular, and all the wild colored stuff is super popular. And I think that's my one beef with frag swaps. And I don't even know if this would work, but my concept would be to have some sort of vendor that just has the weird stuff, like all of the weird stuff for the nerdy coral people that aren't necessarily in the beginner category, but want to venture out and get some of that oddball coral. And that's kind of where I was going with this. You can't do too much because it's just a regional frag swap, so it's not like you're going to get crazy stuff. And they're taking a chance because they have to travel with all of these corals as well. But some weird leathers or, something would be cool to have. Because I went back to this one vendor probably twice for 3 of the frags because he's the only one that really had some weird stuff, and I appreciated that. So
yeah, it's every coral vendor is selling a lot of the same stuff because that's the stuff that's popular, and that's frustrating because I'm always looking for something interesting or unique, or like I'd love to see some crazy encrusting softies, right? There's so many. You go through all these reef books and it's just the different kinds of polyps that there are. Like I'm talking like weird clove polyps and stuff, it's just funky stuff like that would be so cool to see, but nobody's really interested in that. I don't know. I would love to try another Australogyra. I failed twice with them, but that was a long time ago. We've come a long way. I mean, back when I failed with them, everybody was struggling with Gonioporas. Now everybody's keeping Gonioporas. They're keeping them in nano tanks. They're fragging the hell out of them. Maybe Australogyra, maybe our experiences will be improved, but nobody's bringing that in because it's not a very pretty coral. I mean, it's just maybe there's pretty versions, right? Because I'm shocked at how many different colors of Favites there are. And, this Australogyra sort of is like a branching Favites, but it's just kind of doo-doo brown and green, but it's just a cool coral. It's weird, So I think that's what made it hard to frag is just the way that its tissue was and everything, its morphology. But I don't know. I was on I think it was with Reef Bum, I was chatting, and Meckley was like, "Oh, people bring that stuff in. It's just nobody wants it." And I'm like, "All right, how do we get in touch with the people that have it, and then be like, oh, nobody wants to buy it?
Yeah,
can I buy it? But somehow we got to figure that. Maybe Chris can bring it in and get it to us. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't know. I mean, it's also has a side effect of like every tank on Instagram looks the same, or on social media in general and on YouTube, because they all have the same corals. And their aquascapes are slightly different, but they're all negative space or NSA, same NSA, some torches, some red gonies, some weirder gonies, and it's like it all looks the same. And I don't know. I think you were talking about like a natural tank. I love those tanks that have like macroalgae in them. And your buddy that has you did I think he had a reef lobster
Tyler.
You documented his tanks are unique, right? Like they're different. Like you stumble upon his stuff on social media and you're like, oh, what's that? And I don't know. It used to be like when I'd see a mangrove tank, I got excited. Now I think everybody has a mangrove.
He's got some really old mangroves. I think it was maybe the last video that I did on my channel before switching over to the Reef Builders channel. Somebody had a tank breakdown, like we talked about in the last one, at Corner Reef, our local fish store, and brought in these mangroves, and they at that point were probably 6 or 7 years old, and it's still relatively small at that at that age. But he's got, I mean, those mangroves are substantial now. I mean, it's really cool to see, because you always see the, the 1 or 2 leaves here or there, but I mean, he's got little trees going on, and I love that. And I think while maybe those videos don't do the best because they're not flashy and all that stuff, but I feel like if you're kind of a reefing nerd and you're beyond the I need this because it's a cool color part of your reefing career, I'm not dogging that, because I'm still in that area too. I just feel like if you've got another tank where you can do something cool like white light, gorgonians, mangroves, leathers, that kind of thing, I think it's so interesting, and you can really go in deep. I love like cool invertebrates that you can get for those tanks, and seeing little pom-pom crabs running around, and I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just so many facets of this hobby that are left to explore, and I think that's what keeps me coming back, is that there's so much more that we don't know, and maybe you've gotten to the point where you're like, well, I'm just going to go to plants.
Well, but I think that's why, like, we were talking about high-tech sumps, I mean, my sump is like fascinating to me, right? With I've got, various macroalgae growing. I got feather dusters growing everywhere. There's all kinds of critters running around there. I'd hate to have filter socks that are just trapping everything and having a sterile sump that I scrub clean. I don't know. Lately, I've had this explosion of sponges, and I sort of get why Jake hates them now, because he was always talking smack about sponges, but I was always like, no, sponges are awesome. But like, I've got them overgrowing some corals, and I'm like, oh crap! I actually have to prune the sponges, and I didn't put them in there. They're not like ornamental sponges.
What color?
I mean, just white and like fluorescent yellow, and the white ones seem to be just overtaking like little corals, and I gotta hack them back. It's crazy. I've always had sponges, cryptic sponges and all that. I've never had them grow so rapidly, and I don't know if there's something, maybe the silicates in my water went up or something, who knows, and it's getting through my RO. But yeah, I love that was what's so great about live rock in the 90s, is weird stuff would come out of it like 6 months later. 6 months later, you'd be like, I have a lobster, or I have some weird fish swimming around. What the hell was this thing? So, and all these sterile tanks are not really my cup of tea anymore. So yeah, I'd love to see somebody get some turtle grass tanks. Like, we were all trying to grow turtle grass back in the day for a while. I failed miserably at it because the algae would grow on the turtle grass. And then it was just trying to find the right grazers that would keep it clean but not eat the turtle grass itself. Certain tanks were actually pretty good for that, but I just couldn't get it to really take off. But then, learning what I know now about plants and planting a yard, it's like, the first couple of seasons, that plant does nothing, right? It's sending roots and stuff. So maybe what I thought was a failure was I just needed to give it more time to get established. But you don't see anybody growing turtle grass in a tank anymore.
I love that challenge. I like that.
Yeah. May not be pretty, because, yes, stuff grows on it. It looks kind of dirty. But, I don't know. Throw some cool LPS, or do a Hedoni anemone in a turtle grass bed, because that's how you see them. You see them on the sand among seagrass beds and stuff, and put some clownfish in it. That'd be a wicked tank.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
Another cool thing when when you're out snorkeling or diving or whatever, and seeing those the little habitats amongst the larger habitat. One of my favorite things to do on our honeymoon, we went to where we go, Riviera Maya, I think, and they had man-made reef out on the beach. And there was just tons of tide pools. And in every single one of those little holes was a little ecosystem. And the water was crystal clear, and you could see all the fish and the crabs and the inverts. And I've always tried, with any build, to think about, well, what's that scene look like in the ocean? I mean, if you can take any inspiration from there. I think that's what we're trying to capture, right? We're just trying to capture that little tiny piece of the ocean and have that in our homes and kind of nurture that. So, So I don't know where we're going with that, but I think we went we went down the uncommon coral rabbit hole, and
then ended up in uncommon displays
yeah.
or something along those lines.
But overall, I would say getting back to the $100 coral challenge, it can be done. I did it. If you haven't seen the video, you can check that out. I got a lithophilon frag, the branching cyphastria. I got a green bodied Duncan. That's probably the most common out of all the corals I got. That Bacillopora, the Leptostrea, Leptastria, which was also up for debate, and we didn't know if that was cyphastria or not, but it looks like the polyps just hadn't started touching each other, and I think it's just they call it a John Deere Leptastria or Leptostrea.
Oh, those are nice, actually.
Yeah,
the green and orange.
It's really cool looking.
Yeah,
and kind of bushy when it's happy, and of course that Monopora, which I think. I did want to mention this one thing. So if you have, like, you go to a frag swap and you have a $200 budget and say you've got $20 left, just go up to a coral vendor and be like, hey, what can you do for $20? And that's what I did. I just went up to this, Gabe is his name, and I went up and I was like, hey man, what can you do for $10? And I swear that was not planned. He was just like, oh man, like, you're killing me. I think his cheapest frag was $20, but you know, sometimes at the end of those swaps, the less they have to take on their journey, the better. So
yeah,
he gave me this really nice Monopora for $10. So I got that, and then I got the Pavona. I think there's a lot of green that going on there, and someone pointed that out. Like, you got a lot of green corals, but you know, spread them out, look good.
Yeah, but I mean, that's probably the most common color.
Yeah.
You know, corals. Like, what are you gonna do? Yeah, and now it's funny. Orange was this crazy color. Now there's so much orange out there. It used to be hard to find an orange coral. Now it's yellow. Like, it's hard to find something that teeters more on, I guess, between orange and green and is technically yellow.
I think in our nerd group for the leather coral, the yellow Fiji leathers are, I guess, increasingly more difficult to find.
I have one that has split into two a while back, and both are growing, but I cannot get it to yellow up like the old school ones. And I thought I was onto something with green light, because
I remember this discussion. Did you guys had this on?
Yeah,
talking about green, red light and green light.
Yeah, and just how to make gene expression produce certain. I always say this wrong. It's either chromoprotein or chromatoprotein. But the site where they're developing bacteria, E. coli bacteria, to produce the different gene expressions for different, for these different pigments, and they had like this chart of like what nanometer of light will excite or cause expression perhaps in that color range, and all of the yellows were all saying like green, the green spectrum, right? So I thought, well, hey, that's the issue, right? Iwasaki's, all the halides had plenty of green in there, unless you went, full radium, not radion. But then you look at our LED lights, and it's just, 450 nanometer blue, and then you got the royal blue, the blue, and so I thought, well, what if we crank up the greens? But I never saw much of an improvement. Could be that there's just not enough in the lights that I have to do that. I know Jake at the studio literally put like a green LED on a Sarcophyte elegans, and I don't know, maybe that one you'll be there. Maybe they're still running that experiment, but I was hoping we were onto something. I still wonder if it's locale. I wonder if they were coming out of a locale and the ones we're getting now are from a different area. I don't know. It's frustrating. So, because they were easy to keep fairly yellow back in the day. They just came in looking like that. But they were not hardy. And you had to treat them like an SPS, lots of light, lots of flow. The most attractive one was this guy named Richard locally, and he literally had it in the top 10% of his tank under 250 watt
Wow.
Iwasaki's. I mean, it was like 6 inches below the water line, just getting cooked. And the thing was, just
Eating it up.
I mean, it was highlighter yellow almost. It was
That is
crazy.
insane.
So
Yeah. Well, you got anything else you want to talk about? I have some housekeeping stuff here, but
no,
Okay.
I'm good. I just ready for this week to be over, and that's what I like about doing these on Wednesdays, because it's like you wake up the next morning
Yeah.
and it's Thursday, and you had a good reef chat, had a beer, sliding into the
Yeah.
weekend.
on
It's a
on
good
Thursdays
way
on the show we call them Friday Light. So
there you go.
Friday
Yeah.
Eve, I guess, as some people would. But Thursdays always feel good. I don't know why, but there's something about it. It's like we're on the back half now, so we're good. A little bit of housekeeping before we get out of here. Our friends at Gallery Aquatica. I don't know if you've seen this shirt yet, Mark, but in Australia, they made up some Jake Adams tribute shirts. I think they did one for Julian Sprung. It's
Oh yeah, it's like the
it's
Obama
kinda that same
one.
style.
Yeah, the colors.
My buddy and I just ordered ours a couple days ago, and when you check out, note it is in Australian, so one T-shirt is not $50. We got two, and he's like, "It's $99," and I was like, "That's got to be Australian. That's not U.S." And in fact, it was. I think it ended up being like, I don't know, like $30-some with shipping, and I think it's coming from Australia. So all the proceeds from that are going to Windsor and their little Frag. So we've got all the details at reefbuilders.com. In talking to her, she really wants to be at Aquashella Dallas, but she may have the baby at that point. At this point, when we're recording this, she's within 5 weeks. So, I mean, it's down to the wire. At this point, if I remember correctly, my wife was like, I'm ready. I'm ready for this thing to be out.
Yeah, I just want this thing out of me. Yeah, I remember that.
But, and also speaking of Aquashella Dallas, we're all going to be there. Mark, you coming?
I can't. It's May
Yeah.
20th, right? Yeah, it's my son's birthday. That literally, like, that
Bring
day is his
him.
birthday.
He'd
So,
enjoy and love Dallas.
yeah, I got my mom's flying in to be there for his
Gotcha.
birthday and all. Yeah, it's a big
Totally
ordeal,
understand.
so.
Totally get it. Reef Builders is the
Yeah.
media sponsor, so we're actually going to have a booth. I'll be running around grabbing video stuff and hopefully meeting everybody as well. So you can find those tickets at aquashella.com or at reefbuilders.com. As always, any questions can be placed down in the comments section below. We're always open to topic ideas as well. Love to address those comments like we did today. If you have anything specific that you're thinking about right now and you're like, oh, I wish they would have answered this, or I hope they can answer this in the next one, make sure to leave a comment. Mark, anything else before we go?
No, man, it was good talking with you. Yeah, I appreciate all the comments, and I enjoy reading them, and I enjoy some of the questions. And like I said, I stumbled on a great podcast from one of the recommendations, and I appreciate that. So
We didn't
yeah.
go. We
Until
didn't
next
go to
time, I
the
guess.
bookshelf today.
Yeah, well, we were like back in the day with Reef Therapy. We were like, do we like bring up a book and we tried. I think the folks that have been listening to the start probably heard us like every time we're
Yeah.
gonna bring out a book, and then it
Yeah.
just fizzled. But
That's okay. We'll
I don't know.
think about it maybe next time.
You guys have to have. Weren't you gonna come up with some theme
Yes,
music when I would
yes.
like walk off?
It'd be very
camera
similar to
for a book?
Jeopardy or one of those guys. Elevator music of some sort.
Yeah.
All right, Reef Builders. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Reef Therapy, and we will see you in the next one.
All right.